Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and to a style that I have been very excited about for a very long time, the Folk Victorian. Today we're building a Folk Victorian home with a Strangerville pack. If you don't have Strangerville, don't worry, I will point out base game options as well, but we can't just have this pack exist and not build a cute little Victorian, so here we go. The Folk Victorian is most similar to a Queen Anne or Italianate Victorian, but has much less decoration on the outside and is at most 2 stories instead of at least. Kinda like it hasn't quite grown up and gotten into makeup yet. In general, a folk style house is just a simple home with no real style, real is kind of in quotes there, but dress it up a bit and it becomes a Folk Victorian. It still has the classic Victorian elements of a front porch, decorative woodwork, and usually an asymmetrical floor plan, but won't have any of the towers or extra rooms that make Queen Anne homes so iconic. I think my favorite quote I encountered regarding the features of this build was from today's homeowner, which was, "Simplicity with flair." Typically, the front porch is only one level and the trim will be a much simpler design like spindled columns and railings as opposed to the many porches and ornate trims of the Queen Anne or Italianate style. As far as layout goes, rooms generally flow one into another instead of being separated by hallways, and if you looked at the build from above, it would usually fall into the shape of a square or a capital I, L, or T. This makes them incredibly easy to roof with only 1 or 2, maybe 3 gable pieces, and can even be left at the default pitch, so if you're a beginner who really wants to break into the Victorian styles, this is definitely the build for you. These simple homes were constructed en masse as families moved west in the late 19th century through the 1910s or so, which makes them a great choice for Strangerville. They can be found anywhere in the States though. I have several around me, for example, and even lived in one for a while, and Strangerville is about as close to the opposite setting as you can get from my area. The development of the railroad system played a huge part in that. I don't think we give railways enough credit for all they allowed architecture to do with the incredible ability to transport large numbers of pre-processed materials like standardized lumber cheaply and quickly, so thank you railroads. Along with bringing the raw materials, railroads also provided the trims that could be added onto the plain folk-style homes and give them the Victorian style that was so very popular. The rest of the build could be covered in siding or occasionally shingles, although since this home can be found literally across the continent, you could probably get away with other textures if it's appropriate to the area. Traditional Victorian paint colors like green and yellow were popular with the simpler homes as well, but again, do what you think works with where you are building. This is an incredibly adaptable style, and if you build this for another world, I'd love to see you share screenshots in the Discord server. Link is below, but first, we have to build it. I'm starting on a 20 by 30 lot in Strangerville. Before we truly start building, I want to expand a little bit on what I meant by all the floor plan shapes. So an I-shaped floor plan, basically just a big old rectangle. It could also be more of a square. An L will look something like this, and then a T shape could be something like this or like this. So basically that's like the main shape of the build. I'm going to start with essentially an I, a very squat little I, a little rectangle, and then create an addition, walk you through all of that. But if at any point you're like, I want it bigger, I want it smaller, you can create more or fewer additions to follow one of those shapes. 2 thumbs up. Alright, let's go. So I'm going to build in the center of my lot and start with a 5 by 7 entry room. This is a pretty good size living space. So this will serve as the front room as well as the entry, and I'm going to add stairs to the side. Now I am using medium wall height for the first floor. You can use short or medium, probably not tall. We're not going to be that fancy. Now behind here I'm going to draw a 5 by 4 dining space. This will serve partially as a hallway as well, which is pretty common in homes like this. A small half bath off the kitchen. This would probably have been added later after the fact, after the home was built when indoor plumbing was more of a thing, and then a small kitchen here. Now upstairs you could do a half story if your stairs were more inside the build, but basically it would just be creating a room on the inside of the build so you could have the roof on the outside. However, we are doing a full second story on this build, and if you just wanted 2 bedrooms, you'd probably leave it about here. I would put a full bathroom here, a bedroom here, and then another bedroom here. Maybe make this hallway a little bit wider. There we go. If, however, you'd like more than 2 bedrooms, I'm actually going to add on a little wing to the side here off of the dining room. I'm going to start with a 5 by 5 square and a little 2 by 5 bathroom. You can make this bigger or smaller if you wanted to. It is an addition. So if you really want to play up the addition, you could even mismatch the siding and whatnot on this part, mismatch the windows. I'll be going over more stuff like that in a future video as well. I've got so many ideas, you guys. Anyway, and then another bedroom upstairs just on top of that as well. So with one addition, we've gone from a 1.5 bath, 2 bedroom home to a 2.5 bath, 4 bedroom home. Wish it was this cheap in real life. Now you can see we've got a cute little L here. Now before we roof, we of course need the standard front deck, and let me change the lighting here, which is the L key on your keyboard if you're interested. But a front deck, the width of the front of the build is pretty much standard practice in these builds. I will want to raise this up a bit. How far is up to you, but you do want a couple of steps up, and it may reflect the climate. just as much as the style. Now on the back, if you wanted it to remain a small, simple home, you'd probably just add a very small deck off the kitchen. Or if you wanted to turn this into more of a family home, you could definitely expand the deck. You know, add a pool, a barbecue, something like that. For the roof, we're going to use some gables. Now you could just leave it at the default pitch, or if you just want to follow along with me, you could pitch it up a bit. This may also depend on whether your homeowners prefer more the Queen Anne style or the Italianate style. You know what? I've got Pinterest boards galore. Here are a couple of examples of Queen Anne homes that I personally love. Beautiful, stunning, not what we're building today. And then on the other hand, here are some more Italianate, also very detailed, but in a slightly boxier way. If you really did enjoy those Italianate homes, here's what you can do, is grab a floor piece and place it under your roof. Now you can place this before or after you place your roof. I probably should have placed it before, but if you want to place it after, just pay attention to those little arrows, and it'll be pretty easy to tell if you go too far because it'll be sticking out. But the benefit of having the floor there is then you can go over here and grab a floor trim, the exterior trim here. Now some of them are quite simple, some of them are a little bit more complex. Now the friezes can only go on medium wall height and above, and that would be way too ornate for the style. But a little bit of an exterior trim under the roof, whoops, immediately puts it on the wrong floor, can actually look pretty cool. So in this instance, we would have the roof pitched down significantly more. I don't have that border across there. And then once you figure out the pitch of your main roof, of course, copy, rotate, and place. This is going to line up pretty perfectly. However, we do have some eave clippage back here. We don't want this. So grab your roof piece, we're going to pull it in until that green line is just intersecting with the roof. So here it's not intersecting, here it is intersecting. Then hold the shift key on your keyboard to pull that one eave back, copy and place the roof piece again. Here we're going to have to pull the eaves back out for it to line up, but we're tucking the side eaves in. So that will clean that up all nice and tidy for us now. So that's how you would do the roof if you preferred that more Italianate style. And if you like the Queen Anne a little bit better, we can just go through and pitch these all up a wee bit. But in the end, it's just going to be those 3 gable pieces. Now for the deck, we could either go super duper simple with a half gable roof piece, bring it down to size, and hold shift to pull this eave in so that it's clean there, something like that. But a more traditional shape, if you prefer it, some people just straight up don't like these, would be to actually use a half hipped roof piece. So we're going to pull this all the way out to the edge so it's completely covering our deck, pitch it down significantly, not quite flat, down to about there, and then pull the eaves out once. We don't have to worry about the back eaves on this one because they're automatically pulled in with this roof piece. Of course, copy as much or as little of that on the back as you want. This is a pretty big deck, so I'm not going to be covering it. You do you, though. This would also be a great place to add a pergola, which we can discuss later. Now to finish the roof up, unfortunately, we do not have any of that gorgeous gingerbread trim. I would buy in an instant a Queen Anne based kit if they release some new roof trim, like with a kit or something. My money would be gone, but they don't have that. So instead, I'm actually going to grab the chamfer roof trim. Not necessarily because this was a popular roof trim, but the chamfer, this specific bevel, is actually really popular in some of the other elements of these builds, like around the railings or the columns. And then shingles, do whatever you want. Do not leave it default. It reads like the default drywall and the default concrete. You wouldn't leave those, so don't leave the shingles. Because these homes were built across the US, you can find pretty much any siding style on them if you look hard enough. However, traditionally, you're probably going to be finding either wide or narrow horizontal siding like this, although some shingled siding, such as from Get Famous, or the rounder one from Cats and Dogs, especially on the more Queen Anne inspired homes, could also be a thing. This shingle from the new Growing Together pack, thumbs up. I really appreciate the more varied style in this one. And then also the new siding in that pack just comes in so many bright colors, which is fantastic. If you thought the idea about making the addition stick out was clever or funny, a great way to do that would be to add 2 similar but different siding textures, because then it's just like, well, they almost kind of matched it, but they didn't really. Most Victorians, especially those not owned by the upper class, would have been painted in more earthy, neutral tones, as those were the cheaper paints to get. But of course, as it Sims 4, you can do what you want. I'm sure at this point across the nation, there is a home in every single color on the visible spectrum. I'm just going to kind of blend into the desert here a little bit with a more beige siding, and now we can talk about windows. Now, as far as windows go, it once again kind of depends on the story that you're telling, which sub-style you're running for. Most of the windows in the Strangerville pack are going to work pretty well. The pointier ones are a bit more on the Gothic side, but hey, no rules say you can't use that. These are quite nice. I appreciate how square they are. They have just that little bit of the dental trim at the top. Dental is it means teeth, and the trim kind of looks like teeth, so that's what that means. This would actually work great for either the Queen Anne or the Italianate style. These very tall windows are a bit more on the Italianate side. These more detailed windows could be in a Queen Anne. These are from not Parenthood, Growing Together. And if you prefer just using the base game, simple windows like the double hung window or the octopane on most of your build would be fantastic, with possibly some of the taller double vision windows, Angel Wing, or Vintage Vista, depending on sort of the overall style that you're going for. As always, I highly recommend working with reference images, and when you're looking at the windows on your reference images, you want to pay attention to roughly what size they are, as well as how close they are to each other and to walls, like if they're centered or not, if they're grouped in sets, or if they tend to be more standalone. Those are the things that are really going to make or break a style, and then after that you could pay a little bit more attention to like the exact height or whether or not they're ornamented or not, but the placement can really sell it. Front door for base game, we're not going like too crazy, just something of the nice simple sort will be great. But of course I am so excited to use Strangerville, so I'm going to use as much of that as I can. This one is probably about as ornate as I'd want to get here. This one's going to be a bit too fancy for my build today, although you could totally use them if you wanted to. They just are a little bit more suited to one of the more classical Victorian styles, not necessarily the Folk Victorian. I also really like this one, especially that it has the little like letterbox in the door, so I'm actually going to use this one here. And I'm going to use a couple of the taller shuttered windows in the front here as well. Now I can get the spacing all sorted out. Also, I did turn on move objects. I did forget to mention that. So if you'd also like to turn on move objects, you can use Control-Shift-C or all four triggers on your console and type in bb.move objects. You will get a confirmation whether that cheat is on or off. If you do not get the confirmation, try bb.move objects space on, and that should give you the on. This is how I'm spacing mine at the front here. This is the only place I'm going to use these more ornate windows. Everywhere else I'm going to use some of the more simple windows, specifically the twice discrete up top and another set on the sides here. I am going to add a small window upstairs just to an attic space, and now I have to decide what swatch I actually want to use. In theory, I should have decided this before, but this is my first real look at this pack, and the build items are just fantastic. This was so worth it. I think I'm going to go with this off-white. This is quite nice. Another tip for placing windows is press F5 on your keyboard to get quarter tile placement, so then I can actually raise these up a little bit, and I think that spacing looks a bit better. In the Queen Anne style, you may have windows closer together or farther apart, but you're very rarely going to only have one on a single wall unless it's either a very, very large window or you're looking at various tower walls. And you're not generally going to have towers on the Folk Victorians. Could you add one? Technically, yes, but usually it's going to be a very boxy shape. Now I want to make sure that all of my bedrooms have windows, but I also want to make sure that I'm not doing anything too silly with the kitchen and everything. So I'm going to grab a nice back door for the kitchen. Just going to use this one. I don't have a matching off-white, so I'll just use brown. And I'm also going to add some windows to the dining room and our bedrooms. Now if I go up here, this one's actually going to be right on the line between the bathroom and this bedroom, so I'm going to grab just two single windows to place side by side here. I'm going to add a couple of windows to the side, specifically in the bedroom and then the kitchen. I may have to adjust the height of these depending on the cabinet, and I'm not going to add any over here because it's a stairway and the stairs are just going to get in the way. Next up, we can talk about that front deck, finishing that up. Something that I did see on several of the builds, specifically the more Queen Anne inspired ones, if I'm remembering correctly, was that they had a little bit of a pediment above the front door, which is just a small triangular roof piece like so. So if I pull this in, I should be able to match the shingle color and of course the roof trim. And if I pitch the roof up ever so slightly, it'll be a little bit more pronounced. So if you like that look, that's how you would add that. If you don't worry about it. It's not imperative to the style. It's just another fun little detail. One thing that we definitely do need though are some nice turned, spindled railings basically. And believe it or not, the best ones are going to be here from Strangerville. Look at that spindle work, fantastic. Now Vampires has a pretty decent one as well, and honestly the base game isn't so bad itself. Let's see if I can find it. This one, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's alright. Or this one, which is a little bit more decorative. It also wouldn't be shocking to have some ironwork, although not quite this fancy with the gold llama heads and everything. Something a little bit more similar to this. Oh look, there it is. I thought we had that fence, I just couldn't find it. So the iron fence, or this more turned sort of spindle fence, would probably be the best options for your deck area. The columns generally had a fairly simple shape. If you're looking at just the base game and want to go quite rustic, I would use these more square columns. If not though, skip all of these and go right to the end for the Fitzherbert or the Grosvenor. I'm probably not saying that right, and I do apologize. These would probably be your best bets from the base game. Of course, Strangerville has that more like turned shape where you'd put it on a what's the thing called where it spins the wood around? A lathe. Those things. Or this one, which has that bevel that we were talking about from the roof trim. So either of those would work great, or from the other packs that would have a similar shape. Now I'm just going to add some stairs that sort of match here at the front, some nice wide stairs leading up to the front door. We can also talk about spandrels, which are of course right here. If you just have the base game, you're going to want to go with the spandrel with decorative end caps if you're using that column, otherwise it's going to look kind of weird. Or even the budget spandrel. Really what we're looking for is that little bit of detail next to the columns. This one is a little bit over the top, but if you're already pushing it into that super decorative Queen Anne category, you could probably get away with it. We of course have the two options from Strangerville, which are lovely. This one I can't see as well, so I'm going to go with the copious rounder. If at any point you notice that one of your columns has a little decorative piece on it and one of them doesn't, just click the column. This happens when you place too many columns at once. I don't know why, it's kind of weird, but just clicking them once, you don't even have to move them, solves that problem. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it a million more times, I love the Strangerville decoration stuff, and I'm starting to think I might actually change my house color. This isn't the color palette I went with when I was doing the pre-build, so forgive me while I experiment quickly. I don't know that baby blue is the most historically accurate color, but it is a pretty popular color for some restoration projects a few miles south of me, so I'm not too concerned about anybody coming after me for this choice. But if you feel like it, go ahead and drop your comments down below, and hey, while you're down there, let me know what other styles you'd like to see. My list is never ending. I am a one-person team, and I have a few other projects going on as well, but I do these videos as often as I can, and any suggestions that you have do get added to a list, which I reference for these videos. With that, let's grab some flooring for our decks out here, and then we can move inside. Really, I'm just looking for wood. If you have cats and dogs, they have some swatches that look a little bit more worn, which could be really nice. The slatted wood from Eco Lifestyle, frankly, one of my favorites. Base game only, the antique wood flooring. This could be really fun if you really want to carry through that older style, or if you're looking to have it a little bit newer, possibly the hand-scraped flooring, as it still has that unevenness that is quite rustic, but obviously it's been maintained a little better. I recommend matching your flooring and your steps. This is something that I like to do. You don't have to, but I just like that little bit of continuity that it gives. I'm going to place this floor everywhere else inside and on the back deck as well, and of course change my inside stairs to match. Inside, let's talk about doorways first. So you could use doors moving room to room, that wouldn't be unheard of. Some sort of double door, something like this. This one from cats and dogs perhaps. Or of course the mega double doors, which I inevitably use in every single historical build, I think. Or you can use some archways. Naturally, I'm going to be going with the Strangerville archway, but if you prefer something more simple, again, Cats and Dogs has some great options, or a more squared off frame from the base game. Whatever you do for the wallpaper and the floor, you're going to want to try and match these arches too. I'm going to be using this one because it is beautiful and I want to use it, and I feel like that's a good enough reason. I'll be using this specifically into the dining room and the kitchen, like so. Other rooms, though, I think deserve doors for some privacy. If you're sticking with the base game, you'll want to grab one of the paneled wooden doors. And of course, Strangerville has its own paneled door, so I will use that. Now for walls, all of the rest of the standard Victorian stuff sort of applies. If you want it to look really old, you're going to want to go with something that has either full-on paneling at the bottom, or at the very least a sort of chair rail, especially in the dining space. You could also just simply go for something that has the baseboard trim and the crown molding. And I was trying to find one that had a molding swatch that matched the floor in my doors, but of course that does not exist. So fantastic. Of course, if you want to get it a little bit more modern looking, you'd want to start with something that has just a baseboard, skip the crown molding, skip the pattern on the wall, and if you really want to clean it up, you could of course just go for plain walls. I'd like to keep a little bit of character in mind, so I'm going to go with some things from the wallpaper section here, keep some pattern in it, and I guess I'm kind of going to be forced to use the white trim, which I'm not super thrilled about, but that's life. Of course, keep the chair rail in the dining room still. And when it comes to bedrooms, I enjoy just grabbing 3 swatches of the same wallpaper. Keeps it simple, you know? Now, admittedly, I'm not 100% sure on the bathrooms whether they would have been more tiled or wallpapered. So I'm going to go with wallpaper for most of them, but for tile for the one in the kitchen because I'd like to put some tile on the walls here. Nothing too exciting really, just a little bit of an updated look in here. You don't want to go with anything too modern, too retro, or too art deco, so I'd probably go with something just clean and timeless like this one from Growing Together, or one of my personal favorites, the two-tone wall without wainscoting or trim from the base game. I really do just want something super simple in here, just to sort of show that it is a kitchen. And while we're here, let's talk about kitchen layouts. Traditionally, in pretty much any Victorian home, the kitchen will be toward the back of the home, and if it's a large enough home, which pretty much isn't going to happen with the Folk Victorian, you'd have a second staircase around or in the kitchen as well. But we don't have to worry about that, we just have to get a nice little kitchen in here. So I'm going to use this space for a fridge. And if you wanted a more old-timey cottage sort of feel, you could grab some of the cottage living cabinets. The Parenthood ones would probably be pretty good, but I wouldn't go with Dream Home Decorator or Island Living. Those are just a bit too contemporary. So today I'm going to go with, you guessed it, the escargot counter, which is pretty much what I use exclusively at this point. If I hold Alt, I can scooch my door over just a bit here. And this should all work fine still. I do need to scooch the windows up, and I'm going to have to delete one of these for a stove. I choose you. This is quite a small kitchen, but it's not exactly like you'd be cooking for massive crowds of people or parties in this kitchen. This is very much just a little single family household, and it used to be a little bit bigger. You could always expand it as well, especially if you're going with a storyline of a more updated build, do something like this with a more eat-in area. And if you wanted to do that, the roof that you'd pick for the top would most likely be either a gable if you do not have windows here, which we do, or we could grab a half hipped roof piece and sort of copy what we have going on the front deck, like this. I would also like to know in the comments if little notes like that about how to expand your space or resize it are helpful. Some styles have specific rules on how to do it, most don't though, so let me know if that's actually helpful or not. Now for the bathrooms, I'm just going to do quite basic things. I don't think Strangerville came with any yet, didn't come with any extra sinks. I'd like to use this one. I like the style of this one, however it is quite breakable, so perhaps we will go with something a little bit nicer. Right after I said we're not doing anything fancy. If you ever have this issue where the mirror is like clipping into your faucet, you can actually raise mirrors when you have move objects on by pressing 9. Now if you press 9, and hang on, let me set this up. Okay, if you press 9 and this happens, here's what you did. At some point you pressed Control and 9, and that set the camera to go to that part of your map. All you have to do is hit Alt 9 to reset it. And now when you hit 9, your object raises, and you don't go zooming across the map. How cool is that? This shadow I don't like, but it did remind me that I do need to add some railing, which I'm just going to add the same sort of spindle railing that I had outside. Oh, I've kind of abandoned the back deck. I'll come back to it when we're landscaping. Now for this bathroom, it is quite long and narrow, but it has a really nice spot for a tub, so we can do that over here. And then a toilet, and probably a couple of sinks, or a nice vanity at the end. And then pretty much the same thing upstairs. This would be a good opportunity to use one of these super old like shower things. But beyond that, it's just a toilet and a sink. And of course a mirror. I wouldn't make you guys go without that. I'm going to add a bit of fence here because I forgot. And here's my upstairs and downstairs. Now before we move on to landscaping, as always, if you're enjoying this video, please let me know by giving it a thumbs up. That genuinely does help me know like what styles I should keep doing more of and which ones are maybe not quite so popular, as well as leaving comments of course. Also, when we hit 9,000 subscribers, I can tell you what we're going to do for 10,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed, now is a great time. At this point, I think this is like my 35th or so Build Like a Nerd video, so I've done a lot of landscaping. So, if you're interested in landscaping in a particular world, I recommend checking out one of the videos where I built a different home in that world and then copied that landscaping. But I wanted to show you guys some cool stuff that you can do with rocks, move objects, and just give a little bit more unique landscaping style that I have not done before, and I'm super excited about it, so let's stop talking about it and start doing. So we're actually going to start with rocks. Now if you watched the short that I uploaded today, it's called All About Rocks, and I just went through like how to pick which rocks to use for which world, and you can size these up using the bracket keys, size them down using the square bracket keys, a console. I will put your controls on the screen here because I don't have them in front of me, but now you do, so those are your controls for resizing objects. And we know that in the desert we want to do more of a red or an orange tone rock, which are the 3rd and 4th swatches. Now the red is a little intense for me for this build, so I'm going to stick with the first one, but I'm going to lay down a sort of base of these rocks sized up twice around here. I should note that this is going to be a very expensive landscaping style. Rocks are not cheap in this game, so if you're going for a budget build, I would not recommend doing this. So there's my sort of base of the rocks sized up twice. Now I'm going to go through with some rocks sized up once and fill in some of the gaps. I really don't want to be, help if I would hold the right keys on my keyboard. I really don't want to be seeing too much grass back here. I want it to be quite solid and only see grass at the front. Also, I'm holding Alt to ignore the grid while I place things. Console, once again, I will put your controls on the screen because you can do that, which I'm very happy for you because there are a lot of things that y'all just can't do and it makes me sad. Alright, and then once I'm satisfied with that, I may go through and add some not sized up rocks at the front here, just to sort of make it look, I don't know, almost like it's crumbled a little bit over time, you know? Now if there's anywhere that you feel like it isn't covered quite well, like this one, you can take a rock and then use 9 to raise it up a bit, and then again hold Alt to ignore the grid, do the free rotation, get it placed exactly where you want it. That can give you some more dynamic shapes as well. Alright, well, now that we have a giant pile of rocks, what are we going to do with it? Whenever you're landscaping, look at the world around you and try to use some of those plants. Now, unfortunately, they've used mostly debug plants in this world, and I don't have a video about, I think I have one, but it's pretty old. I don't have a recent video about debug landscaping up, so if that's something you're interested in, let me know, but for now, we're just going to focus on the plants that we have. And we basically have a collection of cacti and small flowers, as well as some more agave-type plants, which is... here it is, this one, the agave plant. The oh-so succulent, we'll be using those. And we don't have the exact same cacti that they have, but we have a few, so I will pull those out as well. And they have the debug version of lavender, so if we wanted to pull some lavender together, I would grab that. I'll use the lovely lavender bush, the small one, not the lovely lavender hedge. It will just look a little bit better for what we're doing today. So what I want you to do is grab a plant, bring it over to your rocks, and then press 9 until it's sort of sitting on top of your rock. And there's a plant growing on a rock. All of a sudden, your landscaping is going to have a lot more dimension and height just because, well, basically, you're putting the plants in different dimensions and at different heights. And we can do this with any of the plants, with any number of them. Also, you can always get more variety with your plants by scaling them up and down with those bracket keys. Down, up. I don't think I want it quite that big. I think I'll go down a little bit for this one. Also, fun fact, if you do this, you can grab the Happy Gnome Garden Pal, which looks like he's sitting down, and then if you raise him and place him properly, you can actually make him look like he's sitting on your rocks in your garden, instead of on his little stool. Isn't he cute? Now, once you've got this landscaped however you like it, I would recommend going through and adding some terrain paint. For this particular world, I'm going to start with a layer of dirt under everything as usual, but then add some gravel as well, since it is the desert and you pretty much are going to find gravel everywhere. It protects the soil and helps with water retention and all that jazz. I think that this is just a different version of Pebbles Please. It's the closest one I was able to find, so I'm going to add that to my front path here, and then just lightly sort of around my rocks as well. So there is a new way to do desert landscaping that I actually haven't done before this video. So let me know what you think about that. Now this is a desert and it's going to get pretty hot, so we might want some sort of at least partial shade in the backyard. If we look around, we do see a few trees. Specifically, we have the mesquite tree. You can see that over here. This is the debug version, and this version over here. And it looks like some larger versions of that over there. Now some of the other lots have some of the other kinds of trees, but I don't trust that. We also have some spruce trees over here. I think I'm going to use a couple of these though, so I'm going to take this one and size it up and place it over here. Oh, and a quick note about sizing trees up. Go ahead and pop into your gallery and make sure that that tree isn't actually going to block any of your screenshots. Usually it only blocks if it's on the front corner of the lot, but sometimes they get you on the back corners too, so just always check that out. It's going to be really difficult to get gallery downloads, if that's a goal of yours, if nobody can actually see what's inside your house. I'm going to place a second one on the lot as well. I think I'll put this one more toward the front of the build, so that will provide some shade. I think I'd like to add a little bit of a pool over here, so I'm going to draw one of those in. And I'd like for this to have some shade, so I'm going to add a pergola, which I did just do in the video before this, but they're so fun, let's do one again. Now I recommend using the Smooth Keeper fence. There is a very low-lying fence in the Strangerville pack, but it's a little bit too small. I'm going to grab it in a fairly similar color to what I'm working with, and then outline the area that I want to be partially shaded. Now I did say partially, so I'm going to delete this, and then draw in whatever shape I feel like. Does that look like a cactus, or am I kidding myself? I'm going to pretend it does, because I feel like it. So once you've got that sorted out, grab some interior floor trim, inlaid exterior trim, or the jutting exterior trim, depending on if you want to add columns or not. If you want to add columns, I do recommend one of the more protruding ones, like the jutting exterior trim, as that way when you go to add the columns, which of course I'll use the same ones as I used up front, that'll sort of hide the top of the column there. So that's pretty simple, but it's pretty nice. Now over to the side here, if you have Eco Lifestyle, it has a fantastic sort of privacy fence. However, we are not using that pack today, so I will not be using it. Oh my goodness, my ability to speak is just gone. But if you want it, it's there. I'm just going to use the same fence as before. Last thing to do, unless you want to add more landscaping or anything, would be to go back and grab your dirt brush. I was using the Garden Bedlam. I'm going to make it a little bit softer for back here and just paint under my foundation, my stairs, make a little bit of a trail coming off the stairs just for funsies. Basically, you want to paint under anything that touches the grass. I think that's about it. Let's take a last little tour. So overall, from the outside and from above, you're going to have a very simple shape going on. You're going to have at least one front-facing gable, but if you happen to have an L like we had here, or a T-shape plan, you're going to probably have some gables off to the side as well. The pitch of the roof, the trim, the windows, the layout, a lot of it depends on whether you prefer more Queen Anne style or more Italianate style. Those were the two main styles at the time that these smaller homes were trying to copy, or just do whatever the heck you want. Inside, the entry living space would pretty much be combined. This isn't a big fancy home. You're not going to have an extra parlor or greeting room or entryway or something like that in the vast majority of these homes. Kitchen will still be at the back and there will be separate dining. Sometimes the kitchen and dining would be combined, but our house is a little bit on the big side for that. And you'd have at the very least a half upper story, if not a full upper story. We did a full second story today and a full addition off to the side over here. And then what else you do with the landscaping, the yard and all of that just kind of depends on your story. Do you have a family? Is this a starter home? What do you got? And that's what I've got for you guys today. If you're new here, hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. If you like this video, you're going to love this playlist. If you didn't like this video so much, maybe you'll like this video instead, which YouTube has picked out just for you. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all those fun YouTube things. It helps out so much with the growth of the channel. And with all of that being said, thank you so much for building with me today, and I look forward to building with you again very, very soon. Bye!